Good morning guys. Now it is very early, and that is because recently I have been harbouring an unhealthy obsession with trying to film tench underwater on the canal. And in fact, this is probably my 5th or 6th morning where I've gotten up at 4:30 on the bank for 5 and then back home for about 8 o'clock. I only film for roughly about 3 to 4 hours every morning. As soon as the sunlight comes up and hits the water, dead, completely dead. The fish disappear, stop feeding. So that's what I've been doing now for a while, and I am absolutely exhausted. I've just finally finished filming. I've had loads of underwater takes for you, interesting stuff captured on the underwater camera, changes in rigs to find out what's the most effective. Let's get straight into it. When I'm targeting tench and bream on the canal with the ledger rig, this is how I go about it. For the baits, I tend to use micro pellets, sweet corn, and a good meaty ground bait. That tends to get them feeding. And rig wise, I tend to use a free running ledger rig, a bit similar to the rig I use on the river for the barbel, with a lead of around 1 ounce that obviously free runs up and down the line, and a hook length of about 10 to 12 inches. And today we're going to be starting off with a size 12 micro barbed hook and a single grain of sweet corn on the hair. For my first attempt, I decided to get a bit of bait in the swim to start off with. So I put a few grains of sweet corn, some pellets, and of course some ground bait in there. The ground bait I mixed very dry so it would explode on the surface and almost fall through the water like a great big cloud covering a large area. And in a very short space of time, the swim was alive, not just with loads and loads of bait fish, we also had the tench. And that soon made the water very murky and cloudy. Started off nice and crystal clear and ended up very dirty as those tench moved around, feeding on that ground bait and pellets in the silt. It was time to get the rig out there. Hook length of around 8 to 10 inches and a single grain of sweet corn hair rigged onto a size 12. Unfortunately, as it hit the bottom, a rud pecked at the corn and knocked it so it was essentially landed directly on top of the lead. Now the lead positioning was actually great because it was straight into the silt, meaning you couldn't see it at all, but that bait positioning was absolutely shocking. Perhaps if I'd have used an anti-tangle sleeve, that would have helped push it away. Either way, the rud proceeded to help me out after that and actually pushed that sweet corn away from the lead quite a good distance, which I think would give me the optimal hookup chances. Now it was just time to wait for the tench to come back. The first tench to come in looked like he was about to take it, and obviously you could tell something was up with it. Either that or maybe he just weren't fancying the sweet corn because he swam straight past. But within 5 minutes another one came back in. I don't know if it was that same fish. It goes down, puts its mouth over the sweet corn, and I don't even think it goes in. He just shrugs it off and carries on swimming. We'd been done for the first time this session. I don't know if it was just because he was more focused on eating the ground bait on the bottom, but it didn't even look like sweet corn went right in, and he just carried on feeding straight after like he wasn't bothered at all. But either way, watching that on the underwater camera wasn't very nice. With the tench building with confidence in the swim feeding, it was only just a couple of minutes after that happened, we had another tench come in and hone in on that bright yellow sweet corn, and it did exactly the same thing. You can kind of see the sweet corn go into this tench's mouth, and it must have just come straight back out in the same breath, because there it is, laid on the bottom as the tench slowly swims away. Thankfully these fish weren't spooking off, but getting done twice in a row within about 10 minutes didn't feel great. And here we go again, chance number 3 now, a tench slowly creeping towards that hook bait. This is it. Nope. Once again, it almost looked like it just pushed the sweet corn along. It didn't even really take it into its mouth. Really interesting to see. And once again, I thought it would be 3rd time lucky. Obviously not. 3rd time done in. Surely it can only be a matter of time before one actually takes it and gets hooked up. Here we go. A nice big fat female. This is a good sized fish, possibly a 5-pound tench. And she's slowly noticing that yellow piece of sweet corn on the bottom. And once again, the 4th time we've been done on this rig, but this time we can notice something very particular, and that is the weed covering the hook bait. There is a massive amount of weed gathered around that hook bait and the hair, and I think that definitely stopped me from getting hooked up to that fish, because that one definitely had it well in its mouth. we got a tench on. Don't know if the take would be captured in front of the camera. It's not the biggest tench in the world. I'll take it. Oh, yes, get in. Beautiful canal tench. Right in the corner, look, as it's turned away, he's hooked himself. Perfect. And would you look at that? An absolutely beautiful male canal tench. Presenting really proudly, fin up. Absolutely stunning fish. Look at that. Much better looking than the one we caught at the start of the sort of tench season, as I like to call it. And I'm pretty sure that was in front of the underwater camera as well. So it'd be really cool to see exactly what happened before this fish took the bait. If we got done at all, if any fish came and mouthed the bait, we didn't manage to catch him. But this one definitely did. Size 12, barbed hook, free running ledger rig, hooked itself against the rod tip. Let's get him back. Well, there's a lesson to be learned here. No matter what, as long as that hook and bait is in the water, you've got a chance of catching a fish. That hook was still completely covered in weed when that tench picked it up, but yet it still managed to get hooked up and we landed it. And now it was time to reposition the camera, take what we've learned and shorten that rig down to something a little more aggressive. After watching myself get done 4 times before finally hooking into one, I had to make the change and hopefully that would make a difference. But unfortunately, the rest of this underwater filming session is almost completely written off because I was completely misjudging where I was casting my bait. I was actually casting it about 2 to 5 inches off to the left of what you can see, which is massively unfortunate because the rest of that session was a massive success. I had another take very shortly after catching this fish. Unfortunately, that one did me off in the reeds and I lost it. And then something special happened. Into another tench. It's got a load of weed on it, so that helps it. That's a good size one. That's a good size tench. Oh my God, now he's woken up. Oh my God, that's a beast. That's a beast. That might be 6 pounds, I guess. Well, this one is a proper old canal fish. Look at that. And at £5, 12 ounce, it's one of the biggest tench I think I've ever caught. Look at the size of that for a fish from the canal, a tench from the canal. That's amazing. And I am gutted. I am gutted because I've checked the footage already and my bait, my sweet corn, was just out of shot by about maybe 2 or 3 inches. I cannot believe it, but absolutely nailed. Bottom lip, proper carpy hold that was. Shorter hook length, definitely doing the business. That is amazing. A real special fish to catch from a canal. A tench at almost 6 pounds. That is a real good fish, but it was time to move on. I may not have got the take underwater, but we got the fish to the bank and that was the main thing. And it was time for filming session number 2. So it was time to take what we'd learned from the last session and apply it here. We were going to start this session where we left off. I was going to put on a hook length of around about 4 inches, single grain of sweet corn on a size 12 hook and the 1 ounce lead. And we was also going to change something about the way we baited up. Instead of putting loads of ground bait out there and a few little pieces of sweet corn, I was just going to put a few pieces of sweet corn and a very small amount of ground bait. I didn't want the fish to come in, get distracted and be preoccupied by all the ground bait in there and leave the larger particles like the sweet corn. We want them to home straight in on it and hopefully get a quick bite. And as you can see, the moment that fish put his mouth over that sweet corn, there was an instant connection to the lead and he was hooked and off like an absolute rocket. Well, I'm hoping I captured this one on the underwater camera. I hope so, because I positioned it, well, only a few foot from the reeds in the margin to make sure that I don't get it wrong, to make sure that the bait is always in front of it. And look at that, absolutely stunning park bench. Look at the size of that tail, absolutely huge. This one is, I would say, about £4, maybe towards 4.5, maybe 4.6. Beautiful, beautiful canal fish. These are absolutely incredible to catch, and most of the time you have to get out at 4 or 5 in the morning to be able to get a good chance of catching them. Best slip this one back now, because I'm expecting to get another bite soon. Now this clip gives us a prime example on why you get all those fizzing bubbles on the surface when you're fishing for them. They dig around in the silt so much and cause so much disturbance, releasing all those little gas bubbles. And a lot of this microscopic little tiny bubbles you get on the surface are actually caused by the fish filter feeding, and you can see the bubbles actually coming out through the gill plate of the tench. That's probably why you can distinguish tench away from other species sometimes when you're fishing for them. But it also gives us a clear picture on why you don't always get the bite when you see those bubbles fizzing. It's because they're not eating the particles on the top of the silt, they're digging around deep inside, more than likely feeding on the ground bait that you've put in. That is something that I really have learnt amongst this filming process. I'm not going to show you all the footage obviously, but a lot of the time I had so many fish feeding in the swim, feeding over my area of bait, ignoring every single piece of sweet corn in the swim. Not just the hook bait, but all the free offerings, because all they were wanting to do is feed on the ground bait in the silt. And you can see it, every time they would come in, they would clear the patch out, the dust would settle, you would still see every piece of sweet corn there. They'd come back in again, do the same thing again, not a single piece of sweet corn out of place. And it's because they were too distracted on the really, really fine particles in the silt, giving loads of bubbles on the surface, but absolutely no action on the hook. And this clip is a prime example on what fish really think about bumping into the line. This tench, this big female, comes straight underneath my mono. It runs along its back, scraping off a fine amount of slime, and the tench does not bat an eyelid and carries on feeding like nothing had even happened. Now the rest of that session was actually a complete write-off. It was clear the fish did not want to be eating the larger particles like the pellets or the sweet corn. They just wanted to feed in the silt, and I think sometimes that's just the mood they're in. So in the next session it was time to reduce the amount of ground bait I put into the swim, just try and focus on a few particles in the swim, including my hook bait, in the hopes that I could get a fish to come straight in and pick up my bait straight away. This morning there seemed to be very few tench in the area, and it just seemed like the same fish kept coming round and having a look at the area. And this was the first time witnessing being done on that shorter rig. The tench comes down, picks up the hook bait and spits it straight back out. But it wasn't long before that same fish circled back around again for round 2. And as you can see, the exact same tench comes back, picks up the same hook bait, this time definitely pulls it far enough to actually lift the lead up off the bottom, but manages to shake it and not get hooked up. As you can see though, this fish does have some damage to its mouth, and maybe that aided in it being able to spit the bait out easier. It looks like it's got a bit of a wound that might have toughened up, meaning that the hook won't catch as easy, but who knows, I'm just making excuses at this point. This is the first time I've witnessed being done on the shorter rig. If you look there in that clump of weed just to the left of the shot, that is my hook bait and sweet corn right on the top of some weed, which is absolutely shocking. The lead is down in the silt, my hook bait is up right tucked into the weed. It couldn't be much worse than that. Now, it'd been in the water for a little while and I had an inkling that maybe I was in some weed, so I decided to maybe try and drag the lead back to make sure my bait was just on top of the silt. And if anything, it probably made things 10 times worse, because now you could see that the weed wasn't just around the hook bait, it was around the lead, and it was along the entire length of my line, all the way along my rig. Meaning that if a fish picked this up, I would definitely have a very limited chance of being able to hook up. Hey presto, the first fish that comes up to it is of course the tench that has just done me 2 times in a row. Comes down, mouths at the bait, obviously can't get it in there because of all the weed covering the rig. And then it proceeds to, I'm guessing, get the line caught around its fin or something and kind of freaks out. But it doesn't scare it too much. I mean, the pike is in the swim and that doesn't bother him too much. And it's not long before he comes back around again and starts making his way towards that hook bait. Now would you look at that, and from this side you'd think this is an absolutely beautiful tench, just like some of the others we've seen in this video. But if you look on this side, this one's a Nemo. He's missing his fin look and he's also got a little bit of damage to his mouth as well. But other than that, he is a real scrappy little male tench. And actually this fish has done me over already during this video. I think a session or 2 ago when I came out filming, this one came down, picked up the hook bait, had the hook in his mouth and he managed to shake it. And I don't know whether it's because he's got a bit of a gammy mouth, which aided in that, but definitely no excuses this time because I've managed to nail him. Only a little male, big old pectoral fins, and absolutely took me to the cleaners, through the reeds and everything. Let's get you back. I couldn't believe it. The fish that had done me twice when the rig was in a really good position and no weed on, actually managed to get himself hooked up when the entire rig was completely covered in silkweed. Once again, proving that as long as your hook and bait is in the water, you've got a chance of catching a fish. It was now time for the next morning, underwater filming these beautiful fish. I had changed things ever so slightly. I was fishing a larger hook. It was a size 10 micro barbed. And this time we was fishing 2 pieces of sweet corn in the hope that actually it would be a bit heavier and would hold the spot a little bit easier, not get moved around so much by the fins of the fish or indeed those small pesky little roach. I also kept the larger particles to a minimum, only put a couple into the swim and just fed a couple small handfuls of ground bait. And obviously that was probably a little too much ground bait because the tench came in out of nowhere. They definitely are attracted to the smell of the ground bait and proceeded to just demolish the entire swim, colouring up completely, kicking up silt all over the place. But it didn't take us too long before we got some action. If you look off into the distance, you can probably see my little speckle of yellow sweet corn, and there's a fish moving up behind it. Well, I said in a recent video that there's not generally loads of big fish in the canal. You're seeing the same ones over and over again. This is one of those cases. Lovely, scrappy little canal tench. Took it when it was absolutely coloured and mucky down there, so I don't think you would have been able to see much on the underwater camera. And do you recognise him? How about now? It's Nemo one fin. On my last session here, I actually caught this exact same fish on the underwater camera. I think he just likes to come and see me, don't you? I did put a bit of spray on one of his wounds on his mouth last time, so maybe you just wanted to do that again. Right, let's get him sprayed up and we'll put him back. I was ecstatic that I'd got another take on the underwater camera, but not so ecstatic that we'd had a recapture, the gammy little Nemo pike that we caught in the previous session, literally the session, I think it was the day or two before. But now it was time to end that one and start the next one. Basically every session I went out, I'd get maybe 1 or 2 chances at a fish, and then the swim would go completely dead. So now it was time for the next morning. I was going to take everything that I learned from the previous sessions and apply it to this one. Once again, the short hook length, size 10 micro barbed hook. I was going to fish double sweet corn to hopefully keep it in the same position. And feeding wise, just a small amount of ground bait, just enough to attract them in, but not too much that they get held up just eating that. And just a couple of free offerings in the swim of sweet corn, just to aim for that one quick bite. It actually took the fish a bit longer to come into the swim this session. Every session I've been filming, I'd had the tench come in, I'd say within the first 20 minutes to half an hour. This time it took probably about an hour or so. That's probably from the limited amount of bait I put into the swim. Not as much attraction there, but I just wanted to get one simple, easy bite. And although this isn't the biggest tench I've caught during this venture, trying to film underwater, that one is absolutely picture perfect, pristine. Look at the quality of it. Absolutely stunning. There isn't a single mark on this fish. No tears in the fins, no wounds around the mouth. Just absolutely beautiful. I could look at him all day, but unfortunately we've got to get him back. Or rather her, I think this is a female fish. Absolutely amazing. I've loved these early morning sessions. It's funny when it comes to underwater filming, you can easily get hung up on just focusing on the rig and focusing on what you need to change about the rig to catch the fish. But to me, I find the more subtle things more interesting, like the way the tench feed in the silt, how that creates the little fizzy bubbles that we see on the surface, and how they can get distracted by filter feeding on ground bait and leave the rest of the bait that's in the swim almost. I find it really fascinating, and hopefully it's given you guys something to think about too. I hope you guys have enjoyed watching. This has taken a lot of time and effort and early mornings to make this video, so please go down, hit the like, think about sharing it, subscribe if you want to, and I'll see you guys down the river.